All right, everybody, welcome. I believe we are live on Facebook, and we are back with our LA Multifamily Meetup. We have great speakers today for you. My name is Anthony Volin. I'm the owner of The Collective, and we serve the greater LA area. We have an amazing commercial division led by Will Tiao, who you'll be able to meet in just a moment. We have a great speaker today, Joel, who's going to enlighten us on how we can have better businesses in the multifamily arena. Just before we get into that, I just wanted to give a quick update on what's happening on the residential side of things. Right now, we are seeing the market pick up. There's definitely people that are starting to feel more comfortable getting out of their houses and seeing properties. As far as leases, we're definitely seeing more people come into properties to look for leases and getting calls for that, as well as properties that are for sale. One interesting trend we've noticed lately is properties that are needing work are taking a little bit longer to sell. People aren't quite comfortable purchasing a property where they might have to do a renovation at this time. So they're looking for properties that are more done. So if you're thinking about selling any little projects that you could do to get out of the way to make the house as move-in ready as possible, I would definitely advise you on doing that. But we are seeing prices stay pretty stable, which is interesting. A lot of people thought by this time there would be a big crash. Our economy is not doing the best at the moment, but our real estate market is staying stable. There's not very many new listings coming on the market, so it's keeping inventory at a pretty stable level, but it's really low, much lower than what we'd really like to see. So that's causing prices to stay stable. More than half of the buyers that are in the market right now are first-time home buyers. With rates being so low, it just really makes more sense for people to purchase a home than to continue renting. With zero down payment programs out there, FHA loans for 3.5%, 5% down, 10% down, and so on. It just really makes a lot more sense for people to purchase a home if they can. It's the number one building tool that we have in this country, and people are starting to really take advantage of that. So at a more advanced level is what this group is all about with our multifamily investors or people looking to possibly do that. So if you are a homeowner and you're looking to maybe buy a studio condo for your first investment and rent that out, or you're looking to buy a 10-unit building, or maybe sell a duplex, this is definitely a group that's going to help you figure out the best ways to do that. Having a multifamily property as an investment is really like having a brand new business, and unless you know all the ins and outs of it, there's going to be money that will be left on the table. And our goal at the Collective is to make sure that we protect your wealth and help you grow it. So the point of these seminars are really to help you see a different aspect and something a little bit different that you might not always hear about that can help you grow your wealth. So today we have a really interesting topic, but before we get there, I'd like to introduce Will Tiao, our commercial director. He's an investor himself, does very well with that, and helps so many people really make the most out of investing in multifamily. And I'd like to turn it over to Will now. Take it over.
Thank you, Anthony. As Anthony said, my name is Will Tiao. I am the director of the commercial division here at the Collective Realty. And I also have a property management company called Tiao Properties. We manage a little under 200 units, mostly throughout the city of Los Angeles, and a few outside of the city limits. And as Anthony said, I'm an investor myself. And I always like to take this opportunity to give everyone a little bit of a market update, but also, a bit of a legislative update, because that's oftentimes the biggest, how shall we say, variable nowadays with regards to investing in multifamily is like the situation continues to evolve, both on the local level and the state level, and even on the national level. So let's talk a little bit right now about 1031 exchanges. This is a topic that we have covered pretty extensively here at the Multifamily Meetup. For those of you who are not familiar with 1031 exchanges, in a nutshell, it's the ability for a property owner, and just to take a very like straight example, say you bought a property for $500,000 and a few years back, and now that property is worth $1,000,000. So you now have a $500,000 gain. With that, you would, if you were to just sell it and just to cash out, you'd be paying a significant amount of capital gains tax. You'd start off with the federal capital gains, then there could be state level capital gains, and there's also an Obama, they call it the Obamacare tax, but it's really the Affordable Health Care tax, of additional 3%. So there could be significant knock-on effects in terms of taxes. So what a lot of people do is instead do what they call a 1031 exchange, which is something that's in the tax code, which would allow a real estate investor to say, as in this case, sell their $1 million property. Originally that was 500,000, and then exchange, basically purchase another property that's worth as much or more than the one that they held, and then defer that capital gains tax. And that deferral is as long as you hold that next property or until you do your next exchange. So, so with regards to 1031 exchange, it's one of the few kind of capital gains tax deferral mechanisms in any industry. You can't do that with stocks. You can't do that with almost any other asset. So it really is only for real estate investment properties. And so there was a rule. There are rules to this. You have to have identified a property within 45 days of the closing of your first property. You have 180 days to close on one of those properties that you identify. So because of the pandemic, there had been a lengthening of the time period. Basically, if you were in an exchange, a 1031 exchange, between basically around April 1st to July 14th, and your 45-day or your 180-day deadline was during this period, the Treasury was extending that ability to find your next property until July 15th, which is a week from today, right? So if you were in that stage and you were looking for a property or about to close on a property, that extension was until July 15th, which is now a week from today, which obviously coincides also with the tax deadline, the new tax deadline that they have. So now that deadline is not being extended. So if you are in a 1031 exchange or looking to do a 1031 exchange, please keep that in mind, that that 45-day deadline, the 180-day deadline are going to be hard now, as they always had been previous to the pandemic. But it is something for people who are in 1031 exchanges to be aware of. Another thing that property owners need to be aware of is property owners, particularly in the city of Los Angeles, is that the eviction moratorium that was voted on and approved by the LA City Council and signed by the mayor has been extended throughout the state of emergency. And at this point, there is no end to the state of emergency, as we all know. There's no, they haven't declared a date when that state of emergency will be lifted. So, this has put some pressure on some of my clients. We have had property owners now that are selling their properties because their tenants have not paid and they don't have the ability to evict them. So, and also, at least in the city of Los Angeles, the tenants have up to a year after the end of the state of emergency to be able to pay back any previous rent that was owed. But once again, that year clock doesn't even start till the end of the state of emergency, which we don't know when it is. So we are now going into month 4, right, of this pandemic. And so some tenants are 3-4 months behind on their rent. We don't know exactly when this is going to end. So these are things, these are risks that multifamily owners are definitely facing. Another major risk is there is going to be a new proposition on the November ballot. It's going to be almost like a redo of Proposition 10, which was in the last election in 2000. The years are getting, was it 2018, 2016? But at that time, it was a proposition sponsored by Michael Weinstein of the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. And at that time, he's trying to lift the Costa-Hawkins rule, which is a rule that kind of limits the amount of rent control a locality can do. They're trying to do, in essence, the same thing again. This time, they're not per se specifically getting rid of Costa-Hawkins, but it's in essence the same thing. And in this case, they want to basically allow localities to have the ability to institute not rent control, and not just rent control, but potentially what's something called vacancy decontrol. So currently, if you're a property owner and you're in a rent controlled area like Los Angeles or West Hollywood or Beverly Hills or Santa Monica, say you have a property that's a 3-bedroom and you have a long-term tenant, and that long-term tenant pays below market rent. Say they pay $1,000 for a 3-bedroom. But in the markets, maybe it's worth $2,500. So obviously there's a lot, what they call loss to lease, right? Between the $1,000 that they're currently paying, maybe the $2,500 that's worth. So that's about $1,500, right? Now, if those tenants were to leave, currently you would be able, as the owner, be able to bring that market up to market once those tenants were to leave. Proposition 21 could potentially reverse that, could potentially make it so that local jurisdictions could control the new set rate that you could have. They've now done this already in New York City. And it was passed by the legislature in New York. And I can tell you from people I know in that market that it's had a tremendously negative effect on the multifamily market in New York. So, what's interesting is that the last proposition, like I said, Prop 10, which is very, very similar to this, when it went down, it was voted down in the last election, it went down by more votes than for or against any other proposition, like that particular one. And yet, here we are again. So, so it's just something that if any of you are property owners, you should be aware of. And, it's definitely going to be on the November ballot. I see that there's a question. I have a pre-approval for 550K up to 4 units on a VA loan. I'm finding it hard to find a deal. Understandable. As Anthony said, there is still a real constriction in supply right now, also on the multifamily side of things. And so there's not a lot of supply out there. Interestingly enough, it's kind of the inverse of what, on the multifamily side, of what Anthony talked about. Anthony said on the residential side, if properties need some work, those properties are sitting on the market longer, and people are looking more for turnkey, like ready to move in stuff. That kind of is actually the other way on the multifamily side. What we're seeing is that properties that need value add or have potential value add, those properties are actually moving on this market because investors are looking for properties that they can add value to. The properties that are more turnkey, those are actually the ones sitting on the market. And that is interesting. So it's kind of an inverse when it comes to on the multifamily side. Now, a lot of people ask me, Will, is there going to be a market correction? Are we going to see prices drop? As Anthony said, very similarly on the multifamily side, we haven't really seen a price drop yet through this pandemic. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that even though there are additional risks for multifamily owner investors, that overall collections are still in the 90% range. For example, for our properties, we're at about a 92% collection rate. Now, we're down from pre-pandemic of like a 98, 99% collection rate, but still 92% is, not terrible, considering that like some commercial property owners, like meaning like retail property owners, overall, I'm hearing that their collection rates are closer to 55%. And that occupancy rates for hotels are closer to 30%. Okay, so I'm sensing in the market that there could be definitely opportunities on the commercial side, like meaning retail, hotel, hospitality. Those types of properties definitely are starting to hurt. And those owners, and I think anybody who drives through Los Angeles or anywhere, starting to see for lease signs everywhere, right? I don't think that's anything that's a surprise, right? So I think there will definitely be opportunities. But interestingly enough, multifamily has not yet been that affected. Now, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. The stimulus, the CARES Act, the extra $600 a lot of people who are on unemployment is ending at the end of July. So that could affect rents. There is talk about additional eviction moratoriums. There's one statewide. They're talking about one federally. These are all things, we have to be aware of. But there's also, on the flip side, there's also talk about funds for renters. There's actually, the city of LA has come up with a $100 million fund to help kind of low-income renters. They've announced the rules for it, but they haven't actually started giving out funds. My understanding is that you have to make below the median income, which I understand is about $60,000, and you can get potentially up to $1,000 in rental assistance that would go directly to the landlord. And I believe you can get up to 2 months of it. The landlord has to agree not to file any evictions and not to increase the rent, and there's a few other caveats there. So these are all things, for all of us to be aware of as we're moving forward. One thing I like to do before we get to our speaker is we always like to talk about some of our listings and see if there's any wants or needs. So if you have any wants or needs, please put them in the chat. And we can discuss them. I'm going to share my screen now, just show a couple properties that we have on the market currently, or that are coming up actually. We always try to do both on market and off market properties. Are you guys seeing, let me see here. Are you guys
we see Parkview? Yeah,
201 South Parkview? Okay,
yep.
Great.
We could see just the property right now.
Great. Okay, so this is 201 South Parkview. This is a 5-unit in Westlake. It's a 4-plex in the front and a single family in the back. The 4-plex has 2 3-bedrooms on the top with 1.5 baths, 2 2-bedroom, 1 baths on the bottom. And the house is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. There's 10 parking spaces. There's 5 garage spaces and 5 driveway spaces. Very conveniently located near downtown LA. It's about a 5-minute drive. Currently, the owner is leasing them up. The 2 3-bedrooms are already rented. There's an application for the 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. And when it's fully occupied, we're expecting a 5.39 cap rate and a 14.12 GRM. And we're pricing this at $2,495,000. So definitely great for potential owner user, as well as anybody looking for, in this case, a turnkey property. As you can see, property has been completely redone, electrical, plumbing, roof, all new appliances, all new floors, windows, everything. So it's very good potential cash flow property. So that's one. Let me show the second one. This is not on the market yet. That's part of the reason we do these, is to talk about off-market properties. So this property will be coming to the market next week. It is a 5-plex as well in the Silver Lake area. All 5 units are 2-bedroom, 1-bath units, separately metered for gas and electric, on North Lafayette Park Place, one of the prettiest streets in Silver Lake. It's also completely turnkey, new floors, new appliances, been retrofitted with gas and electric. What's nice about this one is that it's got a 3-car garage, which the owner has the permits to turn into a 1-bedroom, 1-bath ADU. So if you wanted to build an additional unit, that possibility is there. We're anticipating that 1-bedroom to get about $2,350 in rent. The others are getting anywhere from $2,795 to $2,895. Fully leased. We're expecting a 5.43 cap rate with a 14.35 GRM, and the offering price at 2.85. If anybody is interested in either of these, I will put my information on the chat, and you can feel free to email me and let me know if you have any other questions with regards to that. And I see from Betsy, I see that she says coming soon in August. She has a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath single family in Los Feliz in need of rehab. Have them contact me. So let if anybody has an interest in a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath in Los Feliz, any flippers out there, this could be potentially an interesting play for you. So let us know. And obviously, like I said, if any of you have other deals or interest, I know I have a client who I believe is actually on the call who is looking for a 1031 exchange in the 3.5 to 5 million range. So it could be a single property in that range or multiple properties in that range. So we are looking for that as well. And she may be interested in what our next speaker has to say. Joel DURBIN of Cost Segregation Initiatives is going to talk to us today about something that every commercial property owner should know about, because I think it's very important if you're considering, considering owning property. As Anthony said, owning investment property is a business, and this is a business tool that you can use to help lower your tax rate. So, Joel, take it away.
Very good. Will, thank you. Thank you very much, Anthony. Thank you as well for the opportunity. For those of you that are out there, I very much appreciate you taking your time to visit with us here this afternoon. I hope that we'll be able to share some things that perhaps some of you have heard of, but maybe we can provide you with a little more in the way of knowledge as it relates to cost segregation. And I will look to share my screen here, and we'll take you through it. But before I do so, we've all been disruptive, and I know I can't see you, but I think you see me. I think we all could use some chuckles here. And one of the things that I heard just the other day, especially for those of you that have young children, somebody said, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a vineyard or a fully stocked bar to homeschool them. So I don't know if that if that resonates with you out there, but certainly
it resonates with me, Joel. It resonates with me.
All right. So with that, we want to talk about cash flow. Cash flow is so critical now for everybody as we work through this, and that is one of the things that cost segregation creates for commercial and residential income property owners. So I'm going to look to see if I can share my screen here right now. And we'll go right here from the beginning. Okay, great. So cost segregation, for those of you that are that this is new for, It truly is a hidden gem of the tax code, and it is becoming more recognized as time marches on, but yet it still remains somewhat underutilized. And we believe primarily because of a lack of quality education and a lack of awareness about it. So as you see here, what we do is we go in and we look at buildings and we're able to reclassify elements to shorter life periods. And by doing so, what that does is it creates an increase in cash flow. And what the IRS allows us to do is we separate out the building from the land, because the land itself is not depreciable. The building, it is. And what we do is that we look at many elements within the building that, for the purposes of our discussion here with residential rental or apartment building, and when I say residential rental, Will mentioned or Anthony mentioned a condo that could be a rental income property, a duplex, a triplex, as a matter of fact, and I'll speak to it a little further down the prezo. But that example that Will mentioned, the 201 Parkview example, we're going to come back and I'm going to speak specifically about cost seg and what it would mean for that property. So when you look at this and we go in and we identify elements in the building, what we are looking for is the opportunity to maximize your tax savings and put cash in your pockets now. So when we look at these buildings, what are the elements that we're focused on, and what do we want to study within the context of our work that qualifies for shorter life? And as you see here, as I'm listing here, these are the items, or I should just say, these are just a sampling of items, all of which those of you that have apartments or rental income property, I'm sure you can think about how these look in your units. The top portion here, going from carpeting all the way down to the specialty electrical, those are the items that we're able to take and move from 27.5-year life to 5-year life. And the elements that you see, land improvements, landscaping, irrigation, parking lot striping, etc., those are 15-year life elements. So we move those, excuse me, from 27.5 years down to 15 years. And I want you to just remember that 5 and 15-year categorization, because as we get a little further along, that becomes a very important number as it relates to what's going on with changes in the tax code. So with respect to cost seg, people often ask, well, what properties are best to take a look at doing so? And generally speaking, we want to see properties that have about $1 million in building basis, or $500,000 that has been spent on improvements to existing properties. Now, that $1 million number on the building side, that probably could even move south, maybe as low as $700,000, based on the elements that exist within the property. It only makes sense for individuals that are making money and paying taxes. It is applicable for both new and existing buildings. It's available on all types of commercial property, all types of apartment buildings. And again, as I mentioned, it can be used on single family homes as well. We're working on a couple of those right now, as long as it is not your primary residence and you have that as a rental income property. Taking a look at cost seg may very well make sense to do. It is applicable to properties that were purchased after 1986. That's when the rules went into effect, and it is available on that basis. Certainly, anyone that has a new property, it is absolutely worth taking a look at. But oftentimes people ask, well, what about property that I've previously owned? And the opportunity to take advantage of cost segregation clearly exists on previously owned buildings. The way the tax code is written is you are allowed to go back to your original date of purchase, and in a one-time event, you can catch up on all the depreciation and pull it forward. So Will purchased a property in 2015. He was not aware of cost segregation. We went in and we were engaged to do this work for him. We would identify those 5-year and 15-year elements, and we would pull all of them forward into the 2020 year. And in the 2020 year, then, Will would realize the benefits of 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. And so it makes the numbers and the savings very powerful. And again, very worthwhile to take a look at. As cost segregation begins to slowly come more mainstream, we believe that it is extremely important that anybody that takes a look at it takes a very close look at who they are engaging to do this work. The importance of quality and standards is becoming increasingly important in the IRS's eyes. If you have any interest and you go to irs.gov and you look at minimum quality standards for cost segregation, you will see a pretty lengthy list there of what they are looking to see in a report. And the question becomes that if ever questioned, we feel it's extremely important that you know who is it that actually did this work for you, what are their credentials, and do they stand behind their work? And those are characteristics that are core values as part of our firm. So you see that the stamp there at the bottom of the letter, my two partners, Kurt and Dante, they are two of less than 35 individuals nationwide that have earned the distinction of being recognized as certified members of the American Society of Cost Segregation Professionals. They earned this over a period of years by the submission of reports, by peer review of exams. If there are any CPAs out there or folks that know CPAs, you know what it takes to go through that process. I would maybe draw a parallel there. The other thing I would share is that we look to bring both a tax component with my partner, Kurt, who actually is the chairman of the Technical Standards Committee for our society. He hosts a monthly call with the IRS, staying abreast of things. And my partner, Dante, here, who is an expert in construction and project building of projects. And so we look to bring all the important components to the work that we do. Tax reform. Tax reform became a very, very impacting thing. When it first came out, we said back in 2017, it was confusing, it was complicated, it was contradictory. And then once we sorted through it, we realized that the good news is that cost segregation was not only left alone, but it really was enhanced. And as a result here, it creates the opportunity to even further increase the benefits and cash flow that can be created as a result of it. So let's speak to that a little bit. Prior to the Tax and Jobs Act of 2017, as I mentioned earlier, we would go in and we would look at any type of property, and we would identify and reclassify elements that were 5-year elements and 15-year elements. Prior to tax reform, the owner would get the benefit of those write-offs, the 5-year property over the first 5 years, the 15-year property over the first 15 years. But as you see here at the bottom, now on both older older properties as well as brand new builds, once we identify properly these elements, then the property owner has the ability to write all of it off 100% in the first year. And it has made for just very significant numbers. And just simple math here is that if you have a property that has a basis of $5 million, we go in and we cost segregate that property. And generally speaking, we will find probably 20% of that we can move to shorter life. And as a result of that, that 20% represents $1 million in write-off that you would immediately have. So going back to Will's listing there at 201 Parkview, taking a look there, because there are both interior and exterior elements there. There's parking. Again, the elements that I listed originally, there would be cabinetry, there would be flooring, there would be carpeting, there would be plumbing, there would be electrical. All of those things we would take a look at. And so if you purchased that building for $2.5 million, imagine that a cost segregation study could potentially create for you an immediate write-off of $500,000 via the accelerated depreciation component that would be created. Now, that increase, that $500,000 increase in depreciation, people say, well, what happens if I can't use all of that? Is it use it or lose it? And the answer is no. Once the work is done, the benefit is applied to your tax return, and it just carries forward with you. So if you have a $500,000 increase in your depreciation, and if you are in a 50% tax bracket, and that correlates to $250,000 in tax savings and increased cash flow. So if you were able to use half of that year one, $125,000, if you owed Uncle Sam that money, you would keep all that money in your pocket. And moving forward to year two, you would again have that to offset your income and redeploy that capital in a way that best suits you, whether it be to improve or potentially look at another property. So I wanted to be cognizant of our time here and move through some of this fairly quickly. I want to be able to address some questions, but really at the end of the day, when all is said and done, for commercial property owners, we say cost segregation, it's just found money. All right, and I'll leave that there for a second. For anyone that is interested, please feel free to contact me offline. The other thing that I would add, we are very, very proactive as it relates to our front-end due diligence. It's done at no cost or obligation. We only want to take a look at working with people and on projects that we know in advance that we're very comfortable that we can deliver benefit to. So thank you so much, Will. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joel. That was great. I have some follow-up questions,
Please.
And I'm sure probably people in the audience do as well. So if you are an audience member, please put your question in the chat or in the Q&A section, either one, and we'll read it and ask Joel if he and ask him to answer the best of his ability. So I have a few questions. So, obviously we have property owners everywhere from, few $100,000 up until like 10 million plus range, So is there a threshold that you think it's worth doing a cost segregation study, or, what do you generally suggest to your clients?
Yeah, we would say at this point, probably if we can identify if there is a property that, again, once we separate out the building from the land of that total purchase, or again, on a previously owned property, We want to see about, I would say, a minimum of $700,000 that we can recognize as building value. If we have that 700,000, then it's clearly, uh, it, I would say this, at 700,000, we may be right on the cusp, but there's no harm in taking a look. And we often say the only thing you have to lose is the amount of the check you're going to write to Uncle Sam. And after 15 years in this business, we still haven't met anybody that wants to overpay their taxes. So moving from the 700, then as far up as you go, it's worth looking at.
Okay, that's good to know. Somebody just asked a question. How do you evaluate out-of-state properties?
It's a great question. So we have a team where we're able to work nationally. And the approach that we utilize is as follows. Number one, just because of the power of technology, not only Google Earth, but there's some other services that we subscribe to that give us the opportunity to be able to look down on a property. And we just have enough experience that if we're able to get if we're able to get a copy of a building appraisal, if we're able to get construction data, documentation that an owner may have, if we get AIA documents, G702 or G703, G702, 703 for improvements that have been made, we look at that data, number one, and then number two, based upon that, from experience, we are able to put together a benchmark estimate of what we would anticipate the savings would be along with our fees to do the work. We do that in advance, again, at no cost or obligation. If someone chooses to engage us, then we have a survey team, and they have the ability to work nationally. And we go out to every single property that we are engaged to work on, and we conduct a very thorough on-site survey. That is one of the requirements that is needed in order to issue a stamped and certified report. So the combination of our on-site visit, the combination of appraisal, blueprints, construction data, anything really that the property owner has as it relates to the building, that's what we're looking for. In certain instances, property owners just don't have that. There aren't plans, there aren't drawings. So we know that in advance. We incorporate that into our approach so that when we send out the survey team, they will actually create drawings that are required based on measurements, square footage. We will incorporate those drawings into the report to be able to certify it.
Very good. Okay, so I have a client, and this is a real life example. We're looking at a medical office building in the 4 million range. Mm-hmm. It's got about 34 suites. How much would it cost to do a cost segregation study for a building like that?
You said it was, I'm sorry, Will, it was how much?
So it's a medical office building. Right. Let's say it's 4 million.
$4 million.
Got about 34 suites.
Uh-huh.
Roughly how much can a client expect to pay for a cost segregation study like that?
It's a great and it's a very fair question. And really, at the end of the day, oftentimes people know, how much am I going to save and what is it going to cost me? And what's important is to recognize that though some people may say otherwise, there are no two buildings that are alike. Every building is unique to the characteristic that it has. And so because of that, it's very difficult to say, based on what you told me, this would be the price to do this work. We actually have to get a general sense of what that property looks like, what does it entail, just again, through basic information, then we would be able to do that type of an assessment, both on the savings as well as the cost to do the work. What I can tell you is we've done a number of of surgery centers. I don't know if anybody that's on the call travels through the Conejo Valley, but if you take a look in Newbury Park, there is a beautiful facility called the Sarah Medical Plaza. That was a project that we did a couple of years back. I will say this, that generally speaking, a medical surgery center, well, there's going to be even more there. When you think about what does it take to run a surgery center versus a standard apartment, well, there's more in the way of specialty electrical and plumbing and all the cleanliness, the refrigeration, et cetera, et cetera. So we often will find maybe as much as 30 to 35% that we could accelerate. So on a $4 million building, there could potentially be a write-off of north of $1 million immediately. I will say to you, in terms of addressing your question, generally speaking, our fees to do this work, they range on smaller properties, somewhere in the 6,000 at the low end, 6,000 to 7,000 for smaller properties, up to at the top end, 20 to 25,000 is normally the ranges between that. And when I say 25,000, we did a 200,000 square foot manufacturer down in the City of Industry. It was a very large building. They had a lot of stuff there. That was a larger project at the higher end of the scale, but the owner saved north of $800,000 in tax. So he was pretty pleased about all of it. Combining the fact that when folks engage us, the study is a tax deductible expense. So based on your tax bracket, you're writing off the cost and you have that increase in cash flow. And generally speaking, really the math kind of speaks for itself. So.
And when you say smaller projects, how do you define a smaller project? When you say like the 6,000 to 7,000 range?
So I would say for we're doing a single family home right now. A client of ours purchased a single family home down in Palm Desert. It's a 2,800 square foot home, but beautifully done. Immaculate fixtures, solar, beautiful pool area, landscaping, etc. So that project is right around $6,000, but they are saving, because of the timing of the bonus, we're going to increase about $100,000 of depreciation. So they're going to save somewhere in the range of $50,000 to $60,000 in tax. So when you do the math, your net after-tax cost of $3,000, putting potentially $50,000 or $60,000 of cash in your pocket, it's a pretty good return on your investment.
Now, let me ask you, as one of the first things I talked about was the 1031 exchange, right? And there are going to be people who may have owned a property for a while, done some depreciation, and then 1031 into a new building, right? And then they carry that depreciable, aspect with them into the new property, right? Should those people who are getting into the second, like the upleg property, as they call it, like, is that something they should consider a cost segregation study for, or do you think there'll be enough there? Obviously, depending on, how long they own the first property.
Correct. And another great question. And the short answer is yes, it's certainly worth exploring. There's a few factors that we have to take into account. Number one is, in looking at the existing property, we need to look at what is your gain on sale. What is the gain on sale? Because that will impact your going forward basis on the new property. We have to take your gain on sale and basically subtract that from your new purchase. So you went out and you purchased a property for $500,000, as you said earlier. You sold it for $1 million. You have a $500,000 gain. You go out now and you purchase a property for $2 million. Well, we have to take that $500,000 and immediately apply that $500,000 to your new acquisition, bringing your basis on the new acquisition down to $1.5 million. From there, We then again have to look at what is the allocation and what is the split between building and land. And then based upon that, we want to, we would then evaluate and say, yes, we think this makes sense to do, or possibly not.
Okay. Okay. Can you give us an example of, this is primarily a multifamily group. So
Yes.
give us an example of a project you've done recently, multifamily wise, just give us some rough numbers, what was the property worth? What did you charge for the cost segregation study, and what were they able to save?
So I'm going to say, I believe let's see. Let me see if I may be able to give you one because it's in Hollywood. It's in your area. If you bear with me 1 second. I think it is called, let's see if I've got this right. Let's see, is this it? Okay, yes, here it is. Anybody that wants to go online and take a look, it's called the Atwood Apartments. It's in Hollywood. It's on Gordon Street in Los Angeles. Beautiful new building, very pretty good size and scope. We did it a while back. I don't remember the exact number of units, but they have a very, it's a very nice website. It'll give you a description of what it was. I would just say this, respectfully, I'll give you a range of what the numbers were as far as the costs, et cetera. It was the cost of the project was between 10 and 15 million dollars. The building itself, and our work to do that was in the, I'm again going to go from memory here. I want to say it was about 12 to 15,000, somewhere in that range. But ultimately we accelerated over $1 million of depreciation. 13, no, I checked that. It could have been, it was closer to $2 million of depreciation that we accelerated. Yes, closer to 2 million. And the reason being, again, we looked at all the 5-year elements, we looked at all of the 15-year elements, and because of the bonus rules, I can't emphasize enough how impactful that is. So all of that 5 and 15-year benefit was grabbed, and the owner is able to recognize it all in year 1. It was a very powerful project. They were, they were pretty pleased.
Amazing.
Yes.
That's incredible. Well, very good. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Any other thoughts? Anthony, do you have a name?
No, nothing else to add. I mean, this was a really important topic, and again, every time I'm learning something new. So yeah, thank you so much, Joel, for that. And for anybody who'd like to watch this again, it will be posted on our YouTube at The Collective Realty, also on our Facebook page at The Collective Realty. All of the other great speakers that we've had over the years also are on our YouTube page as well. So take a look at some of those. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. Will, anything else? Joel, anything?
Well,
no, Joel, do you have any final words of wisdom?
I would just, again, I would say thank you. And I just think that it's because cost segregation, it's not everyday speak. And so as a result, I think what we've found over the years is that, savvy entrepreneurs that recognize that they do not know everything about everything, they are the ones that go down the path to get their questions answered. And that's what we just encourage people to do. We are not a pushy group. We're not hard sell. We don't call you 100 times a month. We just say, if you want to learn about something and see how it's applicable, we'd welcome the opportunity to do so. And again, I'm grateful and appreciative of the time.
Thank you, Joel. We really appreciate your time as well and the expertise. Oh, I'm seeing one hand go up. Here's a question. Do clients ever use your services to evaluate an investment property beforehand, meaning before they purchase it?
It's a great question. And what we can do, was it Betsy that asked that question? And I have a sister, Betsy, so you could ask whatever you like. You have open reign. It's a great question. And again, if you got in touch and we had the address of the property and we had a general idea of what you think you were going to pay for that property, then we could do a benchmark illustration that would give you an indication that we could further define where we think the benefits of cost seg would land.
Very good. Very good. And I liked what you said, Joel, at the end. We feel the same way. I think at the collective, we're very much in favor of educating people. It's not about the hard sell. It's, if you're going to get into this business, and it's business, there are so many levels to this, whether it's identifying the right property to knowing how to develop it, and how to manage it, and how to take advantage of things like cost segregation. We're always on the lookout for ways to help our clients, maximize their return, one way or another. And so thank you so much, Joel, for your time and your expertise. We really, truly appreciate it. Once again, if you have, I would say to the audience out there, if you have any other questions or thoughts, or, are looking for anything, specific in the multifamily realm, please reach out to us, because we often have off-market properties and whatnot that people may not be aware of. So thank you so much. I'll let Anthony close it up.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining. We look forward to seeing you at some of our upcoming events. And again, please go to lamultifamilymeetup.com if you haven't already, to sign up for our meetup group, to make sure you're staying in touch with us. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe.
Thank you, guys.